Audio test one for the meeting stream. Audio test two for the meeting stream.
We're going to get going in 1 minute. 1 minute. All right, we'll get underway as soon as members have taken their seats. And I'll say good morning to everyone. Welcome to our 62nd Planning and Housing Committee meeting. Going to have to go slow today because I was up until like 1 o'clock watching the Heritage Garage being moved across. So congratulations to Stittsville's own CDS Movers for moving the Heritage Garage back to the other corner of Island Park in Richmond. We acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. May I get a roll call, please?
Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Curry, Councillor Dudas,
Here.
Councillor Johnson,
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Kelly,
Present.
Councillor Kitts, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Troster, here, Vice Chair Gower,
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. So we have a number of presentations today, not a lot of delegates. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 4.1 on today's agenda. For the item just mentioned, only those who are specifically identified in the Planning Act who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on April 8th, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I'm just going to change the view on my screen. There we go. No declarations of interest. Are the minutes of our 61st meeting, March 4th, 2026 confirmed? Thank you. Sorry, bear with me. I need to move those garages during the daytime. So the first item is item 4.1, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 951 Gladstone and 145 Laurier Avenue North. We're going to get a presentation for that. The developer is here to make a presentation, and then we can go to questions of staff. So we'll hold that one. There are no public delegations other than the developer. On item 4.2, the Urban Design Review Panel procedural and reporting updates. In discussions with the committee, we're going to dispense with the presentation on that, but we will go to questions of staff. So we'll hold that item. Item 5.1, the Inclusionary Zoning Policy and Regulatory Framework Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendments will receive a presentation on that one. There are 2 public delegations to hear from, and then we can go to questions of staff. So we'll hold that one. Just running through the rest of the agenda, see if we can let some staff go. For the status update on Planning and Housing Committee increase in motions, is that item received? Thank you. We don't have any in-camera items. There is an IPD on the urban design brief terms of reference and urban design guidelines updates. Had anyone wanted to lift that one? Nope, don't see any hands. Thank you. The cash in lieu of Parkland IPD, did anyone want to lift that one? Thank you. So that is received, and then we'll move on with the rest of the agenda. So let's go back to the top, which is item 4.1, the OPA and zoning bylaw for 951 Gladstone, 145 Loretta. And Eric, we're in your hands whenever you want to give us a presentation.
And I'm a planner with Development Review Central. Today, I'm here to present planning recommendations concerning 951 Gladstone and 145 Laurier Avenue. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located within the Hintonburg community at the northeast corner of Gladstone Avenue and Laurier Avenue North, adjacent to the Corso Italia station. The subject lands include the standard red building and some existing non-residential uses. Next slide, please. The requested amendments seek to increase the maximum permitted building heights from the previously zoning approved heights of 30, 33, and 35 stories to 34, 38, and 40 stories, resulting in approximately 1,050 residential units. Except for the increases in building height, the proposal remains generally the same from the previous zoning approved master concept plan. Next slide, please. This image shows the proposed building heights gradually decreasing and transitioning as the development moves away from the O train station and the Gladstone Avenue corridor, aligning with the intent of the secondary plan policies. Next slide, please. Staff have reviewed the development proposal against the applicable policy and regulatory framework, and it is our opinion that the proposal represents appropriate and good land use planning. Next slide, please. The last recommendation of the staff report before you today seeks continued exemption from community benefit charges. The proposal is currently exempt from CBC, but there are community benefits embedded in the existing zoning via a holding symbol. And these benefits include relocation of existing artists and a secured affordable lease rate for 15 years, $1 million contribution towards Ward 15 affordable housing, $1 million contribution towards the connection of the Laurel Street pedestrian bridge, construction of a multi-use pathway along the east side of the subject lands, and public access easements for privately owned public spaces. The site plan application for phase 1 of this development was approved in February, and there are conditions included in that approval which deal directly with these benefits, including the timing and phase of development in which each of the benefits are to be addressed. In February, staff received a request from the applicant to revise the zoning bylaw amendment application to remove the monetary contributions, being $1 million towards the Ward 15 Affordable Housing Fund and the $1 million contribution towards the Laurel Street Bridge. Citing project feasibility for phase 1 development and other development costs as concerns. The applicant has also indicated that the remaining community benefits that the city will obtain via the site plan agreement will still exceed the value of a CBC at 1% of the total land value, even with the removal of the monetary contributions. Staff acknowledged the community concerns raised regarding the loss of these monetary contributions, but recognized that the contributions being provided, even without the 2 monetary contributions, exceed the requirement on the CBC bylaw. In response to the developer's focus on proceeding with building permits for phase 1, the zoning details have been written to temporarily provide relief from these monetary contributions only where the corresponding above grade building permit for phase 1 has been issued within 12 months of the passing of the proposed bylaw. The applicant has indicated their continued commitment to the remaining comments, community benefits, and these will be addressed in the future site plan agreement. Therefore, staff have no concerns with the CBC exemption request, nor the removal of the 2 monetary contributions, subject to the details of the recommended zoning included in staff's report. Thank you for your time today.
Eric, thank you very much. Before we ask the proponent to make their delegation, I have a motion that we've been working on for a few weeks with respect to the site limiting distance agreement that would, I think, provide them with a little bit of further relief. But I'll ask Vice Chair Gower to make that motion just so I can stay in the chair.
Do you want the whole thing or just the therefore be it resolved? Sure.
I can go with just the therefore be it resolved.
Okay.
And for members, that motion is presumably in the SharePoint site.
Okay. Therefore, be it resolved that Planning and Housing Committee recommend Council direct staff to enter into a limiting distance agreement with the applicant for 951 Gladstone Avenue and 154 Laurier Avenue North, and be it further resolved that the applicable section of the real property disposal policy be waived to enable the agreement to be completed at nominal cost.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. And if people have questions about that, by all means, you can pose those to staff when they're up. But right now, I'd ask the proponent to come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We're pleased to just maybe give speak specifically to some of the concerns that we've heard via written comments. We thank staff for their presentation and for their support through the recommendations of their report. So maybe if I could just go to, please continue. That one's great. Thanks. Back one. So this project has a long history. Of course, the original official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment predates the secondary plan that applies to the broader hub area, the protected major transit station area that relates to the Corso Italia station, which, as we're all familiar, is now up and running. So as we're also all familiar, in 2022, the province made changes to the way density bonusing, as we'll call it, works in the province, and it's gone from what was previously applied to the site, Section 37, to now what's called community benefits charges. On a high level, the obligations for this development are significant as relates to what was applied through Section 37 at the time. You'll see on the screen, these are the obligations that are applied to the proponent for development. So through that Section 37 agreement originally. So a relocation strategy for the existing artist tenants remains an obligation of the proponent. Confirmation of a secured affordable unit rent for the artist tenants within the standard bread building for a period of 15 years remains an obligation at 40% below market. Creation of a multi-use pathway alongside the development remains an obligation of the proponent. A privately owned public space area also remains an obligation. This is also in addition to the standard bread building, which has been retained as a heritage asset, and in addition to that, will be renovated and fully maintained as part of this. So this is just to speak to what CLV is still obligated to do through their process. And this, again, scale is very distinct from what's currently an obligation under the community benefits charge, which is a 1% land value contribution as of the mayor's task force. So this is all just to say that CLV, as the chair is aware, and many on the committee are aware, has been in talks with the artists, the staff about how to deliver on these things, and they're really just focused on as staff had said, a bit of flexibility relative to the obligations. And just before I finish, I want to once again reiterate that this relief only applies if they submit a building permit in the next 12 months. Otherwise, it's taken away. So if the question is, okay, are you going to build this if we give you this relief? The answer is they have to, or it goes away. So I think that's it. I don't know. I'm joined here with Miguel Tremblay of our office. I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
Maybe on a broader scale. The city is still carrying over a lot of these Section 37 agreements. These contributions and these drawdown factors were identified often when policies were not in step with the developments that were being proposed. As you heard now, that the secondary plan and the OP provide very clear direction that these 1,000 units are desirable and well in keeping with those policies. But carrying over these Section 37 obligations hinders these projects from being constructible and actually puts them at a disadvantage in comparison to newer projects that are only subject to the CBC contribution. We're not asking for relief for everything, but there are certain levers that we talked about last time when this committee considered reducing the amount of CBC, and that developers are looking for certain levers to make these projects constructible. It's not to say that all of them are being removed. For instance, the retention of the standard bread building as well, and all of those things are important community contributions, but we're looking for means to make these projects affordable because if you remember my comments back in December, the measure of success is not how much money we accumulated in Section 37 or CBC, but rather how many units together we were able to get constructed. So I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel and Jacob. I don't see any questions for you from committee members. Nope. Okay. But yeah, go ahead, please, Councillor Curry.
Just a motion that we're going to vote on that Councillor Leeper is putting forward. What is the impact of that?
I don't know the dollar value. I think the mover may know, but it's another positive step. It's another positive lever, and I think CLV is appreciative of those gestures. But I don't know the dollar amount because I just heard about that.
I think, yeah. So we can.
Generally, it's a positive thing.
It is.
Great.
Well received.
Lovely. Thanks.
I think density is the more critical piece of what it allows. So, please.
I mean, I thank you for coming today, and I appreciate that you've put a time limit on it, saying that this fee relief will not be applied unless you build, and I think that would allow me to vote for this motion. But it is deeply frustrating to communities. I know this is a really significant development that I know Councillor Leeper spent months, years working with you and with the community on some of these proposed community developments. It is very frustrating to see that a process that would follow in good faith, that there are losses here. And it's also because the developer didn't build during the time that you were supposed to. I understand the financial environment. I understand that we're providing some incentives and some fee relief, but it is frustrating to see the clock being turned back on agreements that were negotiated in good faith with the community. I don't know what the answer is here. I know the fiscal environment has changed, and I also know we're about to debate an inclusionary zoning policy that contains zero requirements for affordability. But this is a tremendous waste of community's time and energy. I'm just wondering if perhaps Councillor Leeper could let me know, what is your community saying about this? How are you explaining this to them? Because this seems like a violation of the social contract as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I'll have the opportunity to address that as we get into the next phase of the discussion. Okay. But I would suggest that your characterization of how the community feels is accurate. Are there any further questions for the delegate? I don't see any hands up. Okay, thank you very much. So we can move into questions of staff. I am just wondering if one of the things that might be useful right off the top is for staff to explain. It's pretty technical. What the limiting distance agreement relief does.
Chair, I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. Within the building code, there are requirements for fire separation from between the building and the property line. And that can be achieved in a couple of different ways. And the most logical way is to limit the number of exposed openings, i.e. windows, on that face. There are other options, including installing fire-rated windows, but it increases the cost to the overall construction of the building. The limiting distance agreement itself essentially results in a situation similar to an easement, where the city would be agreeing not to build within 3.2 meters of the property line, or effectively moving the building envelope that we would have over 3.2 meters into our rail corridor. We've done our circulations. We've consulted with real estate, with transit services. There is no intention to build at this location in the corridor. It doesn't really suit itself to construction, and the intention is to maintain the multi-use pathway adjacent to this site. The issue and why it's before you, so staff have gotten to a point where staff are supportive of a limiting distance agreement. But the reason it's before committee today is because our real estate policies require that disposal of real property interests be done so at fair market value. And the motion that's before committee is to waive that in recognition of the significant contributions that are still being put forward over and above the community benefits charge regime today.
Thank you very much. I've encountered our transit agency's reluctance to sign these agreements for the 12 years that I've been a city councillor. This is the first time I brought a motion to waive that. It does not make sense to me to impose a requirement or a cost on the builder so that they don't build too close to what presumably will be in perpetuity a transportation corridor without development on it. So happy to bring that forward, and it does have a financial value to the developer. With that, I'll move to Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just want to get staff's perspective on Part D of the motion, which is the community benefits charge section. I'm trying to better understand why this is the best deal for the city overall, particularly given our declaration of a housing and homelessness emergency and the need for affordable housing to be built in the city. What's the offset to the $1 million that makes the proposal before us better than the alternative?
Thank you, Councillor. Chair, just to answer that, to put it in perspective, we received a submission from the developer CLV after the last planning committee and before this went to council, which is why the item was referred back to this committee. Part of that submission was that the developer is really focusing on trying to get their first phase going. They want to start this housing start, and looking at their finances, the letter to us was that they're simply not allowing it to work financially with these contributions being part of that requirement. So the $1 million towards the Laurel Street Bridge and the $1 million towards the Ward 15 affordable housing account. I do recognize that those are valuable contributions. The letter that came to us was essentially acknowledging that the contributions still being provided far exceed what we would get today under a 1% CBC. So staff was faced with the choice of, do we want to continue supporting this development and housing start with the contributions that are still being delivered with this project? And the way we approached it was responding to that proposed housing start with that leverage of saying, okay, but we're giving you a 12-month window to commit to that start. Otherwise, these contributions come back on the table. So faced with the challenges of what's in scope and out of scope, our focus was on supporting this housing start, which does bring a significant amount of benefits to the city in terms of general benefits, not from a community benefits regime. But at the end of the day, we're quite comfortable that what's still being delivered does exceed what we would get under our current regime at 1%. And that was a factor weighing into that decision.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you. All developers can make I think, a legitimate claim that it's difficult to get projects built. And I'm concerned that there will be future attempts to eliminate needed funds, whether it's DCs, a conversation we're about to have in the coming weeks, or in this case, the community development fee, which does provide benefit. So I'm not aware of developers that are forced to eat craft dinner. They're still making a lot of money in this city when they develop housing. And of course, they refuse to tell us the profit they're making on housing despite our multiple attempts to get that information. So I have to give this some thought. For me, it's almost like 6 of one, half a dozen of another for the reasons that staff outlined. But I'll just use the word cautious about what this might lead to in the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. On the Laurel Street pedestrian bridge, I saw an assertion that without this funding, it would be very difficult for this bridge to proceed. Can anyone from staff comment on alternate funding sources or how this might change the timeline for that pedestrian bridge? Because it does seem to be a pretty important connector for existing and future residents in this neighborhood.
Good Chair, to my knowledge, we don't have any funding sources earmarked for that bridge. It is recognized within the TMP and as well as the secondary plan for this location as a desirable connection to happen between Gladstone Village and the west side of the Ocean Train Corridor. But to my knowledge, there's no other funding earmarked for this development. I don't know if others have to add to that, but there's simply no funding associated with that project at this point.
But if it's in the TMP, it still may come at some point. It's not deleted because this contribution doesn't happen. It's just, it will become that much more difficult without $1 million to start that work.
We've got General Manager with her hand up. Go ahead, Marissa.
Thank you very much, Chair. You're correct, Councillor. This is in the TMP, so it would have to go through our normal prioritization of budget, and we would look for funding. I would just point out, while I don't argue with the social contract that was given to the community when this came forward, we are dealing with a smaller number of projects that are legacy. They never got built in a timely way when we had the authority to issue Section 37 requirements such as these. And so there's a few of them that we are now dealing with, and some move forward because the burden of the requirements was not so much that they couldn't move the project forward. This is a project that really staff are left with the decision of recommending either it doesn't move forward or we recommend pulling back some of the additional requirements, even though we lose money that could go to affordable housing, money that can go to transportation projects that we don't immediately know where we're going to recoup from. I would like to remind the committee that the proponent does have the ability to, and that we have seen some cases of this, where if the burden is too great, they could withdraw their application, reapply tomorrow, and we would not be able to ask for any of so we are recommending this because the delta is still higher than if they pulled everything and reapplied tomorrow. There's costs for them, and so they don't want to reapply and have to redo all their materials, but we think the benefit of getting some housing built, because we need it across the spectrum, getting some housing built quickly is worth the trade-off, but that's really for committee and council to see if you agree.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just want to make sure that our decision today doesn't delete the pedestrian bridge. It's going to make it take longer to build probably, but it's still in our policy. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. This has been an interesting conversation. I appreciate having it. I think Marcia's comments actually came a long way in helping me to understand what I thought I read in the report, which is that the costs of not moving forward outweigh the benefits of what the community had carved out ahead of many of these changes. And so it's basically coming to committee to see whether that testing ground is reasonable. I guess I just wonder, when we're imagining, we have, for example, a motion from Councillor King that is ongoing, that is asking staff to look at community benefit agreements, for example. And we've had quite a considerable debate on community benefit charges. I wonder what this decision looks like going forward. Is it to be understood that communities, given that we have the community benefit charge, would not be entitled to work with a I don't want to say a compassionate developer, work with a partner in a developer to eke out further community benefit as appropriate, as they can self-determine. I want to make sure that, you know, all communities can feel empowered as best they can to be stakeholders in development. We do see many decisions that continue to remove them from the playing field here. But are we not trying to imagine a world where some of these things can be stackable?
Chair, there are still opportunities for communities to work with developers within the framework that's been established by council of voluntary contributions. I think the journey to get to this point is a recognition that the contributions that are still on the table outweigh what we can legally require under our current framework by greater than an order of magnitude. And so the recognition from staff really is that is, you know, there's an opportunity for a developer to come forward tomorrow and reapply. There's an opportunity for developers to sell properties to other developers that may not feel beholden to the communities in the way that this developer is standing by a number of those commitments that were previously made. You know, so if you're looking for over and above what the CBC is under the current framework, I think that those contributions are still possible under the framework of the voluntary contributions that have been discussed previously at council. Okay, well, I appreciate the sage and straightforward advice from staff on this. Certainly, you know, in reading the report, there are pieces of it that might cause alarm, but if we believe that we're further ahead than we could be in a different situation, I just want to commend the community then and the councillor, obviously, for all of the work that they did to get the proposal to this point, to be able to have the advantages that it has. And if it's a matter of seeing the development go forward in a timely manner, as has been proposed, I think that the benefits here are compelling. But I really appreciate the discussion at the table to be able to air this out, because we don't want to be in a position where we start again, well before the first year of the Housing Task Force report recommendations have seen through, chipping away at some of the things that we hoped we would see spur development. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I don't think I could put it much better than my colleague, Councillor Johnson, just did. This does seem like a blow to the community, to the surrounding community and what they've been promised, but it does seem that there's also a strong rationale for supporting the staff recommendation in this case. And I've heard a couple of times mentioned that if they were to apply today, much of this would not apply to them. So that's point well taken, but I am just trying to understand what that would actually look like in reality. So if the developer was to pull this application and reapply, and this might have been a better question for the applicant, but I will pose it to staff. What would the cost of going through all of that be similar, exceed, or would it be far less than what they've committed to at this point? I'm just trying to understand how realistic it actually would be if we were to not support the staff recommendation, that they would pull the application and reapply.
Thank you, Chair. I can't speak to the specific cost of what that exercise would be, but ultimately, I believe Marcia's point was the developer would have a right in this scenario to come back with a new application saying, I want to remove all the previous approvals and get a new zoning approval that defaults to the 1% CBC. And our assessment of that is that that'd be quite a bit less than what we're getting today. So I don't know what the actual cost of going through that exercise is, but the developer may want to speak to that, but we would definitely have to go through a process and we'd have to make a decision on that, but that's not what's before us today.
I understand that. It still would be nice to know. So I don't know if there's a way to hear from the developer at this point on how likely that would be or what those costs would be. But I would love to hear that. It probably won't make a difference in how I decide today, but it would still be interesting to hear. Thank you.
I'll just ask staff to give that some thought before we get to the council meeting and get that info to all of us. Councillor Tierney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, I don't think we're alone in trying to persuade development and building.
Tim, I'm sorry, you're a little bit soft.
Oh, can you hear me okay now?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, but maybe it's using the wrong microphone. Yeah, we're not alone in this, I think. I think a lot of municipalities are having to get into this space to be able to get housing built, which is unfortunate. We also, again, Chair, I think we just passed something to encourage development by taking, I'll use the term breaking social contract inside the Greenbelt. For a lot of our wards as well. I think that's probably of note where we're taking a bit of a bath to encourage development with inside the Greenbelt. So, you know, it's unfortunate. I think that's just the reality of where we are. So I appreciate the staff and the work that they've done on this. It really helps me make a decision on this. So thank you, Chair. That's all I wanted to offer is, unfortunately, this is what a lot of us are having to do these days.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney. Does anyone have any further questions of staff? No, any further comments? So I will just make I hope relatively brief comments myself. First off, a big part of this application, of course, is for additional height to this development. I think that is absolutely uncontentious. I have not heard a lot about that through the course of the consultation. A few folks obviously are upset at additional height, but generally speaking, this is Corso Italia Station. This is exactly where we want this kind of height. It's where we want this kind of density, and I think people generally understand that. With respect to the benefits that are proposed to be removed, I just want colleagues before they vote to understand how important those are to me, because I will be dissenting on item D of the recommendations. The $1 million towards affordable housing is not going to solve the housing problem, but when for the past, ever since we set up Section 37 benefits prior to CBCs, I have been putting a really big chunk of all the benefits money that comes in into a ward affordable housing fund, and that has allowed CCOC to purchase additional property to add to the number of units that they were able to build on forward. It allowed the Ottawa Community Land Trust to purchase the building on Kirkwood, and most recently, thanks to your support, it has allowed CCOC to build a new low-rise affordable housing development that'll be on the stub of Bullman that you approved several weeks ago. It's not nothing. It does allow me to try to ensure that areas like Hintonburg are going to have at least some affordable housing in them as we gentrify, because it is increasingly a neighborhood in which fewer and fewer people are able to afford to live. With respect to the pedestrian bridge, I really am very concerned that if I don't have this $1 million in that account, that pedestrian bridge will not move ahead. Yes, it's in the TMP, but I think many of you have seen the recent headlines with respect to where development charges are going. It's, you know, our TMP projects are DC funded projects, and I don't think we're going to have the DCs moving forward that we think we're going to have. This would mean that folks who are living in Gladstone Village, which is going to be a very family-friendly neighborhood, are going to have to walk some significant distance to Somerset or Gladstone bridges in order to get around, in order to get onto Breeze Hill, in order to get to school. This is going to be a really important direct connection. Without that funding in the bank to work as leverage, right? We don't want to lose the funding. So if it's in the bank, I think we're going to be motivated to move ahead with that bridge. I'm quite concerned. With respect to would the development move ahead anyways, I'll just remind committee of the decision that this council made early in this term to, for want of a better term, call the developer's bluff on the airport hotel. We chose not to proceed with that SIP, and that hotel moved ahead. They decided to build it anyways. The cranes are going up again in the city of Ottawa. No one wants to be the last to build. I think that there is a motivation that this developer is going to have to want to move ahead with this development. So I'm very comfortable dissenting from this. And still being relatively sure that they're going to move ahead with the development. I have to represent my community today. The community is adamantly against providing this relief. To Councillor Troster's point, they feel that it is a broken trust in the city's processes, and I'll be dissenting on item D in order to reiterate and represent my community's feelings on the matter. So I'll leave it at that, unless there are any further comments. No. The limiting distance agreement motion, Vice Chair Gower, is that carried? Okay. And then are the main report recommendations carried? Carried. I'll dissent on item D, please.
I'll dissent on item D as well.
Thank you. Okay. So that is done. Thank you very much to everyone. It was a good discussion to Councillor Johnson's point. Glad we had it. The next item on our agenda is item 4.2, the Urban Design Review Panel procedural and reporting updates. I know members have read the report. We're not going to receive a presentation on that, but I know some members wish to ask questions about this report. So we'll go directly to questions. I'm just wondering, I'm taking a look at members who had asked that this one be held. I'm not seeing any hands up. There we go. Councillor Johnson?
Sorry about that. I was still sort of wrapping up in my head after the previous discussion. So we're on the urban design guidelines, is that correct?
We are straight to questions of staff.
Thank you so much. Pardon me. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process as it relates to some of the other changes that we've had for community participation in development applications. So, you know, over the last 4 years, obviously, we've had, you know, a real push to accelerate housing development. We moved away from some of the, you know, we've cut some of the timelines for feedback. We've shifted studies around, and now we're eliminating studies as well. And that's, I understand the rationale for much of this, but I was hoping to understand how visible and in what context the results of the urban design review guidelines, or the panel, pardon me, when the results of that conversation will be visible to community members who care. And the reason I ask is because they're triggered when it comes to greater density in a neighborhood, or projects that have more significant changes in a neighborhood. And so they often can be of interest to the community, and maybe a little novel in their massing and size. So I want to know that those neighbors who may have concerns about seeing additional density in their neighborhoods, such as the outer urban ward, can rest assured that there is someone looking at those guidelines, that procedure manual, to make sure that, you know, we are trying to make the most well, for lack of a better term, people are always concerned that we're going to have big, ugly buildings. This is one of the ways that we try and make sure that we don't. So how are they going to be able to see that work?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the question, Councillor Johnson. The changes that we're proposing are actually, in my opinion, going to make the process more transparent. As a result of Bill 109, the UDRP review was largely moved into the pre-consultation phase of the process. And that is why we developed the UDRP report. It was for transparency. It was a tool to actually document the recommendations provided, and then have an ability to post them online once an application was deemed complete. The flexibility now, as a result of the new planning process, is that we're offering the applicants the option to go within the pre-consultation phase or within the application completeness review phase. So completeness and review phase. So either way, the recommendations will be online. So if an applicant wishes to go within the pre-consultation phase, those recommendations from the panel will be posted online at the time the application is deemed complete. And if the applicant chooses to go within the review period, that is a public session. So the public is welcome to attend those sessions. So I hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you so much. And just with respect to the pre-consultation, I know we had done some work over the last term to initiate additional wards into the opportunity to participate in pre-consultation. So I was wondering if you could let me know sort of where that's landed at the end of this.
Certainly, and maybe I'll defer to my colleague, Ms. Wallace, just as it relates to the NDA process, as it relates to the pre-consultation process. But certainly, if there is an NDA and community groups are a party to that, they are welcome to attend the UDRP session if it's within the pre-consultation period.
Chair, if I may just add some additional context, pre-consultations are no longer required. The province essentially removed the requirement for that to take place. So within the existing pilot program where the community associations have been involved, we continue to, and when those pre-consults happen, we continue to engage with the community associations. We have not looked at expanding beyond that at this point into the other wards where that program is not offered. And I think to do so would benefit from some further discussion with the industry, recognizing that the concern of bringing forward information at that early stage, while I think it's gone well in an urban context, there is still some resistance and reluctance within the industry to participate in those discussions or to see that expanded, and it may result in less pre-consultations happening.
Okay, all right. I'm assuming that Mr. Moody answered on behalf of Ms. Wallace, so I'm not in the room. I think that satisfies me for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Curry?
Thank you very much. Just so I have one question that's really directly to this, and then I was also going to ask a question about some of the announcements that we've had recently in case they're related to anything that we're seeing here. My first question is though, so just so I'm clear, when we have taken requirements out for what would be deemed complete, it doesn't mean that we will never look at it. There's still other opportunities. Is that what I understand?
Yes, Chair. If there's something that is a requirement to assess whether an application is supportable or not, we can ask for additional studies beyond deeming it complete.
And maybe I'll just add to that. So I will be drafting a memo that will go to council and be a public memo very shortly on the provincial changes that are proposed. It's a massive package of change again that was dropped on municipalities as of Monday. So it includes proposed legislation and about a dozen proposals for consultation. As part of that is a articulation of what you would be allowed to ask for and what you could be allowed to ask for in certain circumstances. So I agree with Director Moody's comments that any time in the process, the Planning Act gives us if new information comes and there's a really pressing new thing, we can ask for more. But that proposed set of legislative changes would limit how far that scope could go and under what circumstances we could ask and potentially even what the terms of reference might look for certain studies. So that is not in the bill that has been tabled in the House by the province on Monday, but it is part of what they are consulting on right now. So I'll have more details and links in the memo to come, but later this week. But I would just say that it's a live question about whether or not how much authority we would have in the future.
Thank you very much. So for me, the announcement, I mean, I read so many different articles. I don't know where I read this, but I think it was very clear there would only potentially be 12, I don't know if it was housing typologies that would standardize official plans across the province. As I said in my public meeting last night, from Timmins to Toronto, which seems bizarre to me that we could have such standardized official plans, given the diversity of our cities. But I was wondering if you had any comment on that, given this motion. I want to try to make sure we're applying it to this motion, but we're making a change here that may, shortly be not necessary.
So through the chair, it's a really good question. We did look at these reports today in the context of that legislation. I believe that this is in no way contradicting where the province is heading. This report is actually asking us to remove, or asking council to remove a urban design brief, which we see as duplicative to the process. And so we're proposing removing that here, which is consistent with where the province is going. Have we gone far enough? I think that's still to be determined, but I don't think we're doing anything here that's inconsistent. And the legislation proposed on Monday does include reference to a very specific standardized official plan. The province consulted on that in the fall and has made some adjustments based on what they heard. It is more restrictive in the context of the table of contents and the scope of what can be in an OP official plan. So I do think that where and how we apply urban design is an open question based on how this might move forward in terms of the list of studies and reports you can ask for and the standardization of the OP. It doesn't immediately identify where urban design fits, but so far the pushback has been more around sustainability measures and green building design, and that has been the focus of the province. So I think we still need to wait to hear more from the province and the details, but I don't think saying yes to this report is in conflict, but I certainly think there's more work to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other question. So the memo that we're going to get from you, whenever that comes out, will that memo, I mean, you haven't written it yet, but will it clearly indicate to us what the real impacts are for us, and so that we would know if there's any advocacy we need to do, or if staff would recommend that council does anything, if this is going to materially change our city?
So the level of detail that's been thrown at us and how much we can absorb and analyze in a short period of time is a challenge right now. But we are going to be clear about what we feel has basically been decided because it's in the bill itself versus where we think the consultation, which ends in the middle of May, would have a strategic impact on what would come next. So I think maybe we'll be providing direction on where to put our emphasis and where to push the province if there was some advocacy, and then those postings would also come back to this committee, so there would be an opportunity to see exactly how that's framed. But it seems to me that there's going to be some their intention is to move some very specific things forward quickly. This sitting of the House as a majority government, they can move bills pretty quickly. And there's another chunk of work that they're consulting on that is not in this bill, so would be presumably coming back in the fall or next spring.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you very much. So I know in my community, especially when it comes to landmark building projects, like there's one that's being proposed at 267 O'Connor. These are really large projects that are supposed to have architectural significance. The Urban Design Review Panel's feedback has significantly changed those projects. So I'm just wondering what the impact of this change will be on landmark projects, specifically in the downtown core. Is there still an obligation to have an urban design review panel and just not to have that report included in the application? I'm just wondering the nuts and bolts of how that happened, because I've seen how UDRP has really changed a lot of projects in my neighborhood, often for the better.
Through you, Chair, I guess specific to the landmark proposals within Centertown, certainly there's no change proposed within this report as it relates to those focused and special design review panel meetings and that process. So certainly has been a positive outcome, and there's no proposed change as it relates to those projects.
Okay, that's really good to know. So for those big projects, they still have to do it. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. I don't see any other hands up. My own question is, our official plan speaks to urban design and it's an important part of what we want to try to achieve as a city. The provincial proposal to create a short form official plan. I'm just wondering if you have any visibility into whether or not there would be the scope within that very stripped down OP that the province looks like it's going to allow cities to make for urban design.
Through the chair, I would say that it is not obviously apparent where local variation and priorities would fit in the stripped down version. So we will be looking to the official plan and the studies and plans required for site-specific applications, thinking about how they work together, as well as other initiatives like a public realm master plan that we talked about at budget and other things to achieve a similar outcome. But so it's early yet, but if this goes forward, we would have to take a very serious look at our official plan and think about how we achieve those big, bold moves that are outlined there in alternative ways. That, for example, there is one there about transportation, and we have a transportation master plan that helps fulfill that objective. So we'd be looking at all of our tools, but it's fair to say that it is intentionally moving away from local priorities.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I don't see any further questions. Are the report recommendations for item 4.2 carried? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5.1, which is the inclusionary zoning policy and regulatory framework. I think David Wise is going to take us through a presentation on the report recommendations. David, it's been a few years since you've presented to the committee. I'm looking forward to this. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just need to work some of the rust out. Okay. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. This presentation provides an overview of staff's review of inclusionary zoning in Ottawa, how it works, the findings of the market assessment, and recommendations for authorizing inclusionary zoning as a housing program as economic conditions in the future will warrant. My name is David Wise. I'm the program lead within Strategic Initiatives. Sitting beside me is Director Lily Zhu, and also I'm accompanied by Rory Bakch, Senior Partner with Dillon Consulting, who assisted us with this project. Is that better, sir? Good. Before I begin, I also want to note the hard work and efforts of many of our colleagues. Inclusionary zoning has been a challenging file over the many years. So I want to recognize the work of Megan Brody, Louis Alderneff, who's sitting back in the row back there, our business support colleagues, Bill, Maddie, and Laura from our support team, and our terrific consulting team of Dillon and NBLC, who have been instrumental. Special thanks to Margot Hayward, Robert Wilson, and Chun Chu, under the leadership of Matt Bennett from NBLC and Rory Bakch from Dillon, who of course is here today. I also want to note appreciation to the time, constructive advice, and guidance we received from our nonprofit builders, our private home building sector, housing advocacy groups, and community associations who sat with us on multiple calls and in-person conversation, and have helped to inform the framework that we are presenting to you today. Next slide, please. So what is inclusionary zoning? It is a housing program. It provides no land use or development permissions, but it is reliant upon land use planning instruments to be a requirement at the permit desk. It provides council with a regulatory tool to require development to provide affordable housing within a market residential development. Inclusionary zoning can only be required, though, if it is tied to land. And so, per provincial law, the official plan must authorize where and under what conditions inclusionary zoning will be required. And the zoning bylaw must provide the how to make inclusionary zoning applicable law when it comes to the permit desk. Further, these policies and regulations must be supported by and be able to be accommodated within the business case for market housing development. Now, back in 2022, staff brought forward a report on inclusionary zoning and received council direction to explore a 20% set aside and increased depth of affordability with 99-year terms. Shortly after, the province introduced Bill 23 and proposed significant changes to that inclusionary zoning framework and rules, putting inclusionary zoning on hold in Ottawa for the time. On May 2025 of last year, the province released new regulations with a maximum set aside of 5% and a 25-year term. It is under this provincial environment that this framework is now being presented. Next slide, please. It is important to be clear on what income groups are the focus of inclusionary zoning. The 10-year housing and homelessness plan that was presented just a few short weeks ago noted the income decile bands across renter and Ottawa and owner households in Ottawa. And the focus of that plan was really towards groups that are aimed in the low to moderately income bands. Inclusionary zoning acts on a different part of the housing continuum and a different part of that sector. The target is the 4th to the 6th decile bands, market housing that has become harder and harder for moderate income earners to afford. Now, inclusionary zoning has the best effect in helping to reduce the price of that housing that is available for moderate income earners. These include dental or medical technicians, early career professionals, trades apprentices, people who find themselves being increasingly priced out of the housing market. Now, inclusionary zoning cannot address affordability on its own. It does not replace programs that can provide deep affordability for our lowest income households. But what it can do is it can be stacked alongside and in support of other resident and unit-based housing programs. Next slide, please. So under these new provincial rules, how does inclusionary zoning work? First, we need to acknowledge that inclusionary zoning does not create free units. It works by requiring developers to take a subset of their units and offer them at a reduced price or rent. This means that a private market development will earn less revenue from that building, while the construction costs will remain unchanged. This represents a revenue loss that the developer will need to accommodate somehow to keep that project viable. Now, in a hot market, that offset might happen by increasing the price on other market units within that building. It might involve reconfiguring the project or its internal financials, or it might involve the developer making decisions on whether a project can still go ahead as designed. When the market is struggling, things become more complex. We are seeing downward pressure on rents, downward pressure on sales, while construction costs continue to remain. And so that feasibility gap becomes increasingly harder to close. It is this impact on the business case for residential projects and the frictional impact that inclusionary zoning has in development economics that makes inclusionary zoning such a challenge. This is also why the province has taken a cautious approach to what cities can do with this tool and requires a market assessment to be conducted to support policies. I'm going to turn it over to Rory at this time to walk through the market assessment.
So the city through staff retained the services of Dillon Consulting and NBLC to undertake the market assessment that's required by the province. This assessment modeled typical build scenarios across different geographies of the city and incorporated recent land transactions and newly completed developments. We used that to build prototypical examples that were then modeled through the market assessment. We modeled the internal financials using industry standard hard and soft cost assumptions and development financials consistent with the experience of the consulting team with market developments across Ontario. Not surprisingly, what we found was that inclusionary zoning and the reduced revenue has an impact. The underlying challenge is the housing market itself. It's in trouble. High development costs, that's both the high cost of land acquisition and the high cost of construction, tapped out market pricing, and ongoing uncertainties have made it very challenging to build housing at all without significant incentives. So the introduction of inclusionary zoning into the struggling market might not have the effect of creating more affordable housing. Rather, it would have the effect of reducing the creation of more housing at all. That's that concept of friction that you heard David speak about. As such, the market assessment did not recommend a full mandatory inclusionary zoning program, but recommended that the city look to the future. Next slide, please. So while inclusionary zoning is framed as a mandatory tool for affordability, Just wait for them to get caught up. There you go. While IZ is framed as a mandatory tool for affordability, it can also be a pathway to support and leverage affordability in private development through voluntary means, while giving council a regulatory tool to act when the market cannot or will not act on its own. So even though IZ is not feasible now, moving the policies and regulations into place now gives council the ability to respond to future conditions, while also setting out a framework that council can couple with further incentives to encourage voluntary inclusionary zoning to happen in the meantime. David, back to you.
Move for the next slide, please. So what are staff proposing? Inclusionary zoning is not an immediate tool the council can use to create more affordable housing now. But inclusionary zoning is also not a tool that council has at all right now. So staff are therefore recommending to give council a new tool and put all the requirements in place now so that it is ready for use if and when it is needed. This will include clearly setting out the rules under which inclusionary zoning will operate, who it will apply to, the terms by which it will apply, and how it will operate. Staff are recommending that the initial rate be set at 0. This is consistent with the market assessment report that Rory has just presented. The rate must be supported by that assessment per provincial law, but also because there is more work to do to spin up this new housing program. As noted, even without a mandatory requirement, inclusionary zoning can also be a foundational tool for a voluntary or optional inclusionary zoning program to advance in the interim. Next slide, please. We also need to recognize the broader context. We know that housing is at the top of mind for all levels of government. Senior government is very focused on reducing barriers and frictions to housing, not adding to them. The 3 cities that were on the brink of implementing inclusionary zoning in Ontario right now, Toronto, Kitchener, and Mississauga, have had their inclusionary zoning programs suspended by the province. So no city in Ontario currently has inclusionary zoning in effect. Next slide, please. For the next step, staff are recommending passage of this policy and zoning framework to authorize inclusionary zoning and give council a tool that you currently do not have. Following approval, staff will then work to develop the detailed guidance to bring this program into effect on a mandatory or voluntary basis, and will return to council with reassessment of housing market conditions within 2 years, with recommendations on how next to proceed with a mandatory program. Last slide. So therefore, the recommendations are as follows: that committee approve and recommend to council the passage of the enacting framework, that we go back to develop those implementation guidelines in consultation with stakeholders, that we look to complete that required market assessment and return back to committee within 2 years, and also to look at and assess additional financial and regulatory incentives that might support the launch of a voluntary program in the interim. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wise. We do have 2 public delegations. I'm not aware of any motions that are coming forward, but if anyone did have something, now would be a good time before the delegations speak. I'm not aware of anything, so we'll move on to our first delegation, which is Jason Berggraf with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, who joins us online.
Good morning, everybody. You can hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chair. So, good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm pleased to speak on behalf of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association on the city's proposals on inclusionary zoning. First, I really want to acknowledge the significant amount of work that staff and consultants have done on this policy, including their consultations with industry and the flexibility that they've embraced to ensure that Ottawa gets the best housing outcomes. We agree with the core conclusion that under current market conditions, inclusionary zoning would further limit the creation of housing, both market and affordable. We also support the city's proposed approach to set the rate at 0% for now, subject to future reassessment. But of course, I want to be clear about GOBA's position. We don't support the establishment of an inclusionary zoning regime in Ottawa. Inclusionary zoning, as said, is not a comprehensive solution to housing affordability, and it doesn't create free affordable housing. There's no such thing as affordable concrete, affordable labor, or affordable financing. There is a cost to provide below market units, and someone always pays. In practice, that cost is either passed on to the other home buyers or renters, paid for by other levels of government, or most concerning, and what we've seen over the past little bit, is results in not projects proceeding at all. That matters because developments happen at the margin, and right now the city's own analysis shows that many projects are struggling to be viable. This leads to our biggest concern, the cumulative impact of policy. Inclusionary zoning would be layered in the same areas where the city is relying on housing growth to be the most affordable, around transit in high-density developments. Through the Housing Task Force, the city has already moved to reduce, defer, or eliminate other costs to those types of projects, including community benefits charges and parkland requirements. If we layer inclusionary zoning on top of that, we risk slowing or stopping the very housing supply the city is trying to encourage the most. And the city is at risk of perpetuating a cycle of adding costs as the market warms up, only to have to pull back those costs or be forced to pull back those costs or have them addressed by the province when the market slows down or stays at a low level activity, such as we're experiencing right now. High-density projects around LRT stations are critical to our intensification targets and our overall housing targets, which affect funding from other levels of government. Now, if the city does move forward in the future, there are some critical conditions that should be in place. First, inclusionary zoning must function as a partnership model. That means clearly defined incentives and offsets that need to be in place before any requirement is introduced. And second, the policy needs to be flexible. That includes allowing offsite delivery, partnerships with nonprofits, and alternative approaches that can achieve better housing outcomes. And I will say that staff have been very good in working with industry on making sure there's a lot of options to deliver those housing units. In closing, inclusionary zoning mustn't become another cumulative barrier to the housing supply in Ottawa. And if implemented prematurely or without the right conditions, it risks undermining overall affordability rather than improving that. Thank you for this. We look forward to continuing to work with staff and council to make sure we get this right. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berggraf. I don't see any hands up. I'm looking around. We appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second public delegation is Charles Gibault, who I think is joining us online as well. I'm being told you may be on mute, Mr. Gibault. There you go.
Hello.
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. I'd love to be seen if I was earlier. Perhaps.
You'll need to turn your camera on for us to see you. Happy to give you a minute or two to
Okay.
work
Very
through
good.
that. And there you
go. Okay.
Welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. Whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was very surprised to hear on CBC that the inclusionary zoning was going to be reduced to zero. And so I'm here to speak of an alternative to encourage developers to provide affordable housing. And it reminded me of a submission I'd made to housing staff, I believe Lauren Reeves, in 2024, that I suggested there's existing legislation, Ontario regulation, that allows municipalities to lease finance affordable units. And that's what I want to draw your attention to today. I think you may have a copy of the regulation in front of you. Not that you have to read it in depth right now, but what I am proposing is that we propose to you a sample project. I say sample, but quantitative in every aspect, that the city treasurer, your legal department, and planning department would require. And so I suppose what I'm asking today is, how would we move forward on this? We're prepared to make, as I said, an actual proposal for a new building to be constructed and work out all the details for your staff to assess. And those details are outlined in the Ontario regulation that I provided you with. So I'm here to start that discussion.
Charles, the matter that is before the committee today is whether or not to accept the recommendations that are put forward with respect to inclusionary zoning by staff. It sounds like you want to speak to something that is out of scope to that discussion. I know you've contacted my office. I have not had a chance to review the materials that you've provided in depth, but what I could do is commit to getting back to you sometime within the next day or so.
Okay, very good. I was encouraged to bring this forward today, so I thought I would take that opportunity.
Understood. And we do appreciate your being here today and for your really strong interest, obviously, in affordable housing, which this committee shares. So unless there's anything else, I will thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I'll get back to you. Okay, there's time for questions to staff. Councillor Dudas.
It's quick with the hands up button there, apparently. So why are we doing this right now? The problem that I am seeing is that it doesn't make anyone happy. It's 0 as a recommendation, and I know that the recommendation would allow for the framework to be built so that if at a more robust time in the housing market, we can trigger this. We do not have a crystal ball as far as I can tell. The market, all markets right now are incredibly volatile and tumultuous. How do you know that what you develop, and I'm looking at the dates you're coming to back in 2027, then again in 2028, how do you know that what you develop will be reflective of what we actually want to use as a tool?
Thank you, Chair. Those are excellent questions. First off, I can answer the first part of the question. Why are we doing this? We are doing this in part, number one, Council in 2022 directed staff to review inclusionary zoning. It was included as a priority measure within the official plan in terms of the flow out from the new official plan that was put in place. And also it was included within the former 10-year housing and homelessness plan as well as a priority initiative that the city to pursue. So there is existing council direction that staff did need to follow up. It was also included within the housing acceleration framework that council passed back in 2024 as a milestone that we need to achieve to enable that framework. But that's more the procedural reasons for why. The main challenge that we have here with respect to this is that when we are talking about a housing crisis, it is useful to have all the tools that are available and not necessarily to need to use them, but simply to have them available. Inclusionary zoning is a tool that currently does sit there. And what staff are looking to do is make sure that that option exists under the framework and under the rules that the province has set aside. There are requirements and strict requirements for how and when it can be used. And those are the tests that staff would be bringing to bear when we come forward in 2 years' time to assess whether or not council should in fact actually flip the switch. That is not to say that in 2 years' time, staff will recommend that we flip the switch. It all depends upon the conditions of the market, how things are looking, the stabilization, how transactions are happening through the city, what is the change in interest rates or construction prices. There are a number of variables that we would need to assess over the course of this next year to understand what those trigger mechanisms could possibly be. What I would say is this: putting together the framework is a significant undertaking with respect to the policies and the zoning framework and pieces that are in place. What we are suggesting is to put in place that framework now so that that tool is available. If it turns out that in 2 years' time, that a regulation would be useful in order to reach council's objectives, whatever they may be within 2 years' time, within a new term of council, I would respectfully suggest that it may be better to have that tool available rather than suddenly realize that you might want to have that tool available and need to restart a process from the very beginning. It is a lengthy and time-consuming process. And so if we have that tool that is there, then council has the option, whether or not they wish to flip that switch. Chair, I hope that answers.
So it does. I'm looking at this also from a resource perspective, and please, David and Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have unlimited planning staff as a resource. We're tap dancing on quicksand with the provincial government making announcements every single day, it seems, regarding planning and housing. So as you noted, this is a significant time investment and resource investment. Are those resources not better allocated to what is happening, what's coming from the province, and moving forward on some of the housing acceleration plans that we have? And I'm, again, I see immense value. I have been a massive cheerleader for IZ zoning in the past. I'm just sitting there going, do we send you off? You work for years. You could be focusing on other items, and you come back with something that's lackluster because we just can't read the tea leaves.
Thanks for the question. So the chair, this report and recommendations are important and stepstone for us to proceed to the next step, which would include looking to potential financial incentives to encourage market development and to incorporate affordable housing as well. In addition to the procedure reasons that David just summarized of why we're doing this, we also have a commitment with CMHC when we're signing the Housing Acceleration Fund, that this is one of the tasks that we have to do. So there are several reasons that we're doing this, but the result is still valuable and informative for our next steps.
Okay, so just for my understanding and clarification, we are required to do this as part of our agreement with CMHC?
Correct.
Okay. Puts it in a bit of a different frame for me. I'm still very uncomfortable with us spending time on something that we don't even know is going to be effective or that we want to use at the end. I'll leave it at that, Chair. Vice Chair.
Councillor Lowe.
Oh, thanks. I mean, my main concern, or the thing that stood out at me, was the fact that we're looking at a policy right now that the province has essentially suspended in 3 other cities. But the answer to the last question there, I may have missed a little bit of it. What would happen if we don't do this? What would happen with our CMHC agreement, or what would happen if we don't go forward with this?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, it is certainly true that the inclusionary zoning framework was put in place as a milestone under the Housing Acceleration Fund. CMHC does require the city to report annually on the completion of milestones. The completion of those milestones is then assessed as to whether or not the city will receive the full extent of funding. We receive $44 million in funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund on an annual basis. Inclusionary zoning is a file, however, that the CMHC has recognized has provincial I'm going to say influences or being influenced by the province. So these are matters that are outside of the municipality's control. So they have advised us that they would be taking a look at circumstances where the city has reasonable control over how they are able to complete those milestones versus situations where the city does not have reasonable control over how to move forward with a milestone. That being said, the city has been in compliance with all milestones to date. We have so far a 100% completion rate. The most significant milestone that CMHC was looking at was, of course, the passage of the new zoning bylaw back in January 28th and March 11th. So certainly they would prefer us to see that milestone completed, but I cannot speak to how CMHC will view council's decision to not move forward with a framework at all. That's something that would be entirely within the hands of the CMHC to judge.
Okay, so if we're passing this with a 0% set aside, would they see through it at all and say, oh, you just passed this just to put a piece of paper in the filing cabinet to check a box or something, and react accordingly?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. Mr. Chair, I think one of the things that, and again, I'm not privy to how the CMHC will judge internally what we do and do not do. In the conversations we've had concerning this file with CMHC, there has been a recognition that while inclusionary zoning was considered as a significant tool for cities to use to provide affordable housing, as time has gone on and we have seen the significant growth in other incentive programs, such as the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan and the tax benefit that has come from there, along with other incentives coming in from other levels of government, the ability to leverage affordable housing using those other tools has been much more significant than we thought. In particular, the Affordable Housing CIP program has been very successful in increasing voluntary contributions of affordable housing within private market development. As such, the weight of expectation that CMHC has for inclusionary zoning is, at least in terms of the conversations we've had, less. Now, CMHC is also well aware that there are economic realities the city has to deal with. They are aware of our position and they have no concerns with the city moving forward at the 0 set-aside rate. They are interested, of course, in seeing that the city establishes this tool in compliance with what the milestone requirements were. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Okay. So today what we're approving then is that, and then or rather, so today what we're approving is kind of setting down the framework, and then in terms of actual implementation, it will sounds like it'll come back to committee in Q2 of next year.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kavanagh?
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for giving us a briefing ahead of time as well. Appreciate that. It's a big topic, and it affects a ward like mine where we're getting so much development because we're getting new transit stations. So there's lots of development around the transit stations. And of course, people get pretty cynical about this because when they see a lot of buildings being built and then find out, well, there's no affordable housing, that it just frustrates people because they think this is being built because there's a lot of people that need homes out there. So it's concerns, but we do have partnerships, and we've had this discussion already with some developers, and we're just confirming that those still go ahead, the ones that we've negotiated.
Thank you for the question, through the chair. Yes, we have several tools that could incentivize the affordable housing development with private developments near the transit stations. We have the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan program, the CIP, which gives private developers a rebate tax increment after the development. That program was approved by council in 2024, so just short of 2 years. And so far has been 8 developments participating. resulting in 488 affordable units among almost 2,000 market units. The additional benefits of that program and approach is to create and encourage mixed income developments, embedding affordable units and, wider variety of housing types and populations, income levels into one location, shared amenities. There was also while the project incorporated the youth group as a target client group for their project. So that was one of the example of the real financial incentives that could achieve that goal. Just to add that inclusionary zoning itself, it does not provide any financial supports or incentives. It's not a financial tool.
So just to clarify, those examples you gave, that's not inclusionary zoning. That's it.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's important to realize that there's other things that are happening out there. Mr. Burgraff talked about partnerships with nonprofits. He did mention that. So that is outside of the inclusionary zoning definition. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's important to know that nonprofits are the way to go if you want true affordable housing, and they certainly know that. I mean, there's a lot going on out there, and there's also a lot not going on out there because some developers are just not building. They're saying it's not profitable to build, period. And I have many projects that are just not moving forward, and we even have a developer that's changed their mind about building housing at all. That's incredibly frustrating. So I get that we're trying as much as we can to get them still to build housing, that is, and we need every tool we can. So I'm just showing that there's different ways of doing it, and inclusionary zoning was one definition, and it's obviously not working right now because we can't even get builders to build at all because they're saying it's just not the right time or the expenses are too much. So I appreciate that, but I know this is kind of outside the scope, but what are we doing to encourage more nonprofit housing? Because I'll let you just answer that, and I know you're going to have a good answer.
Briefly, please, just as significantly out of scope.
So thank you, Chair and the Councillor. Briefly, the affordable housing sectors are supported largely through our affordable housing capital strategy works. That includes pre-development support, capital funding support, some concierge support, and coordination and support letters to other levels of government and the funding sources in a nutshell.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for giving me that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I guess I think that at first I thought this was quite bizarre. Councillor Gower and I were talking about this the other day. This is actually bizarre, 0%. However, hearing what we've heard today, I think it actually does make a lot of sense because here's the reality. Right now, in this moment right now, it would not be a good thing to put any percentage on this, right? We heard all the ramifications of doing this type of thing right now. However, none of us in this room can predict the future. You have no idea what's coming down the pipe. Could have a different government provincially. We'd have a different government federally. You never know what's going to happen, right? You don't know what's going to happen to society. It's not a financial planning tool right now, but it might be. A government can say, oh, guess what? If you put inclusionary zoning and you have an OCH run it, even in an existing building, you really have no idea. We have seen so much come at us in the last few months and the last few years. You actually, as a planner right now, probably cannot predict the future at all. So I think it's fair for us to be ready for this, set it at 0 right now and be ready. So that's my overall comment on this. I want to say that this presentation I thought was excellent. One of the things I have complained about in the past, to your annoyance potentially, is that I didn't feel we were getting an understanding that staff could walk in the developer's shoes. And this presentation certainly reflected that there seems to be a lot of understanding now as to why things won't, as they say, pencil, or they're not constructible, I think was the term you used last night in our public consultation. these are real things, you know, and the conversations we have with developers and they register on the lobby registry, they help us understand these things. And I feel that now where everybody's got a lot more understanding. You know, we talked about whether a pro forma, sample pro forma would be helpful for you to run the numbers along with the developer. And I don't know if that's what you're doing, but I certainly feel that way after that presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, so I just wanted to, you know, back when I was getting back into the job market in I'm looking at the girl right now, so I guess 2019, I had to write a piece for my employer on why the city should think about inclusionary zoning. You know, that was my test. I had to write in French about it. And here we are in 2026, and I think we actually owe the public a demonstration of our understanding of the issue. It was a hot topic only 7 years ago, or how old are you? 7 years ago. And now we're in a very different place. It's worthy of a conversation here at committee. And I just want to echo the previous speaker's comments. I was so incredibly impressed with this presentation. It demonstrated a grounding in the current economic reality, in current careers, in a very, very sensitive staggered approach to the quintiles we were after. It's an incredible level of detail. And if we're going to come out with a recommendation that suggests 0%, then we should definitely be able to demonstrate our understanding of why we're recommending nothing right now. You know, and so I think that has really been achieved. So I want to commend Mr. Wise for his work here. I think it should give folks who are critical of the city an understanding or an appreciation that we really are trying to ground ourselves in the economic realities and trying to advance those pieces that are worthy of consideration at this time. So now we have a moment where we have a process that we can develop for a stage of readiness in the market. You know, we have colleagues in BC right now, talking to councillors in BC right now, who have just recently passed a bylaw in New Westminster to mandate landlords to have a cooling room in their buildings. So if you can't have all of the units have air conditioning, now they're asking landlords to have a cooling space. It just goes to show you the differences in where the housing markets are. Here in Ontario, we're trying to do everything we can to spur development. In BC, the housing market is relatively healthy, and now they're able to introduce additional values and expectations within that built form. So to have something already prepared that we can use in the future as the market conditions improve, I think is worthy of passing today. I don't think it's I think it will create a set of nimble resources later, and we can move away from the pearl clutching of the development industry at this time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Tierney?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just want to echo a couple of the points I heard. Like Councillor Kavanagh, it is very frustrating when you have a lot of development taking place and we don't have any kind of carrots or sticks, I don't really care what you want to say, to encourage that kind of typology. My questions to staff, and I kind of understand, because Councillor Dudas teased it out there, that this is a requirement. But everything changes very quickly, just as we saw a couple days ago, a federal/provincial announcement that from an FCM perspective, we're still digesting, because, and same with AMO, they're also digesting it as well, because removal of DCs in return for some weird application process, and we're just not all there. I guess with all this happening all at once, happening so quickly, how does this play into, and I don't want to go totally off scope here, Chair, but kind of all ties together as we have all these opportunities to encourage development. How are we going to blend this with what we're doing here today? Is there any opportunity? Like, it'd be great to have something.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, David.
It's an interesting question. And I might go back a bit to some of the questions from Councillor Dudas and from Councillor Curry with respect to the interesting nature of inclusionary zoning. And I apologize, I'm going to get a bit nerdy here, but so bear with me, and Chair, if you agree to if I go too overboard. But the Development Charges Act, oh, watch out, is really interesting in that it actually sets up two types of units that can qualify for financial relief. One of them is the affordable units, what we consider to be purely defined as an affordable unit. And the other one is an inclusionary unit. And those are actually considered in the Development Charges Act as two separate things, even though for the purposes of what we've done in this report here is we've actually aligned them. So they are, to all intents and purposes, they are the same thing. But they do not have to be. Regardless, under the Development Charges Act, if you are considered an inclusionary unit, and if you are deemed an inclusionary unit, whether mandatory or through a voluntary contribution, you will still be eligible for development charges relief, community benefit charges relief, cash in lieu of parkland relief. So there is an indirect financial tool that is associated with inclusionary zoning that staff have aligned this policy framework to do. So that is where I say that although we are not suggesting a mandatory program right now, this is where, and to go back to Councillor Dudas in terms of are we kind of spinning our wheels, just to sort of frame it appropriately. This is a launching point, and it is a potential to actually spin this into a housing program that could create opportunity rather than being focused on a liability for developers. But it will depend upon future work that does need to be done. There is additional financial incentive that additional financial analysis that we have asked our colleagues at NBLC and Dylan to do. The market assessment represented a point of time from early 2025. And we know that since that time, there's been a number of new programs that have come down from senior levels of government. There are new financial tools that are always coming down from CMHC, such as the MLI Select program. We also have passed a bucket of tools under the Housing Acceleration Plan as well. Those packages still need to be priced in and understood as to what they do in terms of, number one, stimulating the housing market overall, but number two, helping to bridge that gap that exists for layering on affordability on top of that. That is work that we have already started. That is work that we are looking to bring forward. And that is also work that would be covered under the recommendation 4 of this report. We can't predict the future. It's absolutely true. But as planners, we can do what we can to position ourselves so that when it comes, we at least have the tools ready to respond.
Thank you, and thanks for your nerdiness, because I think you're caught on to what I was kind of alluding to there, and I appreciate the nerdiness. With the shifting land under us all the time and possible reduction to DCs and this new application process to make us whole, this is a lot of work. So I appreciate staff staying on top of this, because we're all kind of learning. You know, just a couple days ago, things changed again. So thank you for your nerdiness, continued nerdiness. Godspeed.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. I'm always fascinated to see when councillors are all universally or everyone focused on the speaker. And that was one such moment. So thank you very much for the nerdiness, David. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much. And I will add to the pylon. Look, I worked as a communications professional for most of my career. That was the most clear presentation of a very complex issue that I've ever seen at committee. So congratulations to your team for putting that together. My understanding is certainly much better after this conversation. Here is my question though. You mentioned that even if there's no affordability requirements attached to inclusionary units, those units could still be eligible for fee relief and relief of things like development charges. So is it possible that they could be in inclusionary zoning and be getting something without giving something? Or are you just saying that relief would be possible on a voluntary basis if they offered some rent relief?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The alignment is still subject to the criteria in the Development Charges Act. Again, I'm just, sorry, the nerd comes out. The affordable, the definition for affordability within the Development Charges Act is reliant upon a development being able to provide a unit at average market rent, and that's citywide average market rent. It's a blended composite average from CMHC, or the 90% of the average market purchase price, or the lesser of those compared against the income-based ability for a household to pay at the 6th decile. So that's the threshold that the Development Charges Act has set in provincial legislation that a developer can achieve in order to get those development charge exemptions, cash flow park land exemptions, CBCs. Now, those are all subject to being tied into an agreement. They can't just simply say that. They have to be tied to a development agreement through my colleagues in development review, through site plan, or some other type of mechanism. And that would be for a maximum of 25 years. So there are still bounding boxes around this.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my comment will just be, I think we're seeing the limits of using zoning to actually create affordable housing. I think this is a policy that was really touted a few years ago, and we're understanding its limits. So I'm supportive of us setting up the framework and taking a look in a couple of years. But again, I will register my frustration and my concern that we're embarking on kind of a great experiment here with the housing acceleration plan, with the number of fees that we are reducing or deferring, which, you know, unless the promised developments are actually developed, unless those builders actually build, it's really just a cash gift to private for-profit developers that are still very profitable. And again, my frustration remains. We have to put all our cards on the table. We have to show all our finances, and we're doing it in the hopes that it'll spur housing development. But I still have never received a good response from the development industry on what threshold would take a project off the shelf for them. What is the profit margin that makes a profit viable? Because as far as I'm concerned, we're being asked to forego fairly significant revenue that we need to build complete communities and to offer affordable housing that is desperately needed on the promises that these developments will finally get built. And we just did it with the previous file with Loretta Street. So that is my warning. My final question is just, when you say in 2 years we'll reevaluate based on market conditions, so like what things will you be looking for that would tell you that it's time to actually implement some affordability requirements into this policy?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I did want to touch upon with Councillor Troster is we have been working quite closely with respect to understanding the underlying economics. There are the two challenges. Number one, there is the gap from what is stopping housing from advancing now, and what is that fiscal reality that we're seeing. I mentioned before that there is that downward pressure on rents, the downward pressure on sales prices, while construction prices, interest rates, et cetera, still remain the same. We have been working to quantify what that means on a per unit basis. Of course, these are always point in time. These are always specific to particular developments, but we do have a fairly good understanding of what that quantum is, what that delta is between feasibility and there. Then you throw in the affordability portion on top of that. So there is a stacking effect. There is what incentives and offsets are needed from society. And not necessarily through fiscal means. It could be through the HST relief program announced yesterday. We simply don't know what the impact of that is, but there will be an impact. So what are the impact of these things to close that feasibility gap, just to make housing tip over, to pencil out, to get into the red, get into the black, sorry. The second question on that is what is the delta that is needed to check with respect to affordability? And there are two dimensions to that. One of them is how many units do you want to have affordable? Inclusionary zoning right now, the mandatory requirement is 5%. But in our official plan, we previously said 20%. Our 10-year housing and homelessness plan that went through last year, we set that to 10 to 15%. So the CIP program requires the developer to have at least 15% in order to become eligible for the tax relief that's available through that. The other axis on that is the depth of affordability. Inclusionary zoning starts at 6th income decile. But as we drive that decile down, and this is a policy decision that we would have to come back and have that discussion here at committee, as we drive that down to the 5th decile, or to the fourth decile or to the third decile, that gap becomes larger and larger to close. And so it becomes a question on how do we allocate and how do we close that gap, which is also part of why we look at this tool within the framework of all of the other tools and incentives that we have available and the offsets that we have available.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will say I was very excited by the new definition of affordability that's in the the refreshed 10-year housing and homeless plan, which is not about comparison to the market. It's about ability to pay. Because at the end of the day, affordable housing is how much income do you have and how much can you afford to spend on housing? And I was very happy to see that plan very firmly say that it is about 30% of income, 30% of net income. That's what it's about. So, you know, I think we can play with the numbers, but the reality is it's not affordable if people can't afford it. And I have lost faith that minor incentives will create deep affordability in the way that we actually need to tackle the housing crisis. So I'm very interested to see the way this plays out. But I will register my skepticism because I think we're doing a lot and we're asking very little of the development industry right now. We really are. And the housing acceleration plan was the biggest transfer of incentives to the private development sector that the city's ever considered. So this is kind of a grand experiment, and I'm very interested to see what happens in the next 2 years. And I hope we're not filled with regret having given away money and not actually spurred development. That is my concern. So anyway, I can support this report. I want to thank staff for your work on it. I'm disappointed to see that we're asking so little right now. I also understand the economic environment, but I would love to see more clarity from and more honesty, frankly, from the development industry on profit margins and viability of projects, because I think it's relevant. We have to make these decisions in public, and that is information they are allowed to keep private. And it's very frustrating. Thank you very much.
Well said, Councillor Troster. Councillor Lowe?
Thanks. One of the answers, something that was said in the last little bit kind of got me curious. So if we're looking at a percentage of units, like if the developer chooses to do this, if we're looking at a percentage of units, would that sort of disincentivize the creation of like larger units, like for families basically, if they're trying to get as many units into a development as possible to maximize on these on the potential incentives?
Thanks for the question, through the chair. The inclusionary zoning itself currently does not require or differentiate the size of units. However, there are other tools and that the city applies do require that. For example, the CIP program does require a distribution of different sizes of the units. I believe through the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, there will be a family strategy that would require the provision of the family size units of affordable developments as well.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. I don't see any other members' hands up. Amazing. I don't have any questions for staff, but I do want to reinforce the recognition that I think a lot of us have that the world has changed since inclusionary zoning was first floated. I remember a lot of even late night conversations with then I think Solicitor General NACV as the pressure was on the Wynne government, and people were very excited about inclusionary zoning. David and I were trading stories of some of those first meetings at which we thought we might be able to accomplish 20% requirements for inclusionary zoning. And, you know, the world has absolutely changed. It is a different government. Though we can't look to the market to build affordable housing. I think that this is a strong recognition that if affordable housing is going to be built in our city, it's going to have to be built by the not-for-profit providers. And we need to redouble our efforts to ensure that our not-for-profit partners are well-funded and can build the amount of affordable housing that we need. And it's interesting to see who is not here today. I was sorry, I was fascinated by the fact that you know, we don't have the housing advocates out who were out in great force 8 years ago. It's a strong recognition of a changed economic reality out there. So it doesn't do us any harm to pass these recommendations. It sets us up for future. I'm very interested in the DCA discussion that Mr. Wise brought to us. But with that, we'll bring it to a vote. Are they carried?
Dissent on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of your work on that. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hear
Yep,
a dissent
dissent from me.
Councillor Johnson?
No, quite the opposite. Councillor Lowe.
Oh, from Councillor Lowe. Okay. Yep. Don't want to make assumptions, but
The other Counselor Johnson.
yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much to the staff for a lot of work on that. I got a chuckle out of the CBC headline on this story. Affordable housing plan contains no requirements for affordable housing. That was a good one. But I think we all understand the reason why. Okay, moving on. I think we are just about done. Took care of a whole whack of things, leaving us only with item 9, notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Councillor Dudas.
Just when you thought you were done, I have a very lengthy notice of motion to read in. Okay. Whereas Action Ottawa is a program of the City of Ottawa designed to increase the supply of affordable housing in the community by providing financial support, incentives, and other assistance to nonprofit and private housing developers to help provide affordable and supportive housing. Whereas Action Ottawa functions as the city's primary initiative for facilitating and expanding the development of affordable housing across Ottawa. Whereas the city's affordable housing capital strategy outlines funding allocation progress on affordable housing developments and key initiatives advancing affordable and supportive housing. And whereas a key objective of the Housing Acceleration Plan is to support a diversified and sustainable not-for-profit housing industry to strengthen development capacity, reduce risk and costs, and improve housing delivery outcomes. And whereas the Housing Acceleration Plan outlines complementary actions to accelerate affordable housing delivery on municipal lands, including introducing flexibilities in calls for proposals, simplifying regulatory environment, developing a 10-year roadmap for utilizing municipal lands, advancing city-led development preparations such as pre-zoning and environmental remediation, and exploring long-term land leases to preserve value for taxpayers. And whereas Ottawa Community Housing Corporation, as the City of Ottawa's wholly owned municipal housing corporation, is accountable to Council for the development, ownership, and long-term sustainability operations and leveraging of existing and future community housing assets. And whereas the city currently uses requests for proposals, RFPs, as a tool to allocate city-owned land. And whereas the non-market housing industry continues to evolve through sector-led, partner-based models, such as the Bumblebee Initiative, developed collaborative by OCHC, Options House, Ottawa Salis, and Gruno Nonprofit Housing that leverage collaboration among nonprofit organizations, social service providers, and the private sector to foster innovation, share risk, and improve efficiency. Therefore, it be resolved that staff be directed to review current processes and policies respecting the allocation of municipal land and resources for affordable housing with the goal of streamlining the city's approach while maintaining transparency, fairness, and accountability. And be it further resolved that as part of this review, staff consider a range of different models to more efficiently move projects forward, including but not limited to leveraging OCHC as the city's municipal housing corporation and considering a pre-qualification mechanism for established sector partnerships and other alternatives to RFP processes. And be it further resolved that staff consider how to best recognize the varying scale and capacities of organizations, encourage partnerships, and explore strategic uses of long-term land leases and transfers to balance affordability goals with long-term value for taxpayers. Be it further resolved that staff be directed to ensure the proposed updates to the processes align with the city's procurement bylaw, real property disposal policy, Action Ottawa guidelines, and applicable legal requirements, and includes recommendations on transparency, fairness, and reporting. Be it further resolved that staff work with OCHC to explore ways to more effectively streamline future developments and improve the speed and affordability at which wholly municipally owned non-market housing is delivered in Ottawa. And be it further resolved that a report detailing the outcomes of this motion rise to Council through the Planning and Housing Committee as soon as feasible.
We'll debate that one at our next meeting of the Planning and Housing Committee, assuming everyone has actually read through it by then. That's a long one. Exactly. Are there any other notices of motion? I don't see any. I haven't received any inquiries. Nope. We have no other business. We are adjourned until our next meeting of April 15th, 2026. Thank you very much, everyone.